Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the From Crisis to Success webinar. My name is Natasha, and I'm an events coordinator at CMI. I will shortly be handing over to David, who is running the session today. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can ask them using the live chat box to the right of your screen. We shall answer as many as we can. Today's session is being recorded and it will be shared with you later today. Now over to David, CHMC Assessment Manager at the Chartered Management Institute.
Thanks, Natasha. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar, focusing today on working from home. There's a number of things I want to talk to you about today, including resilience. How do we maintain our own personal resilience? How do we look after ourselves? And what are the things we need to think about when we're working from home and communicating with others from home? So I want to start, as I often do, and those of you who've watched some of these before will know I like to use quotes. And here's something I want us to consider. Persistence and resilience only come from having been given the chance to work through difficult problems. And let's face it, we're all working through difficult problems at the moment, and we're all building on our resilience naturally and organically, if you like, with the current situation that we're all facing around the world. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that, because I think that's really important, that what we're going to talk about with resilience is something that you're already living through and you're already doing. And there's an old great Latin Roman quote, isn't there? You know, that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and I think this is certainly making us stronger. When we're thinking about resilience and working from home, there's a number of factors that we need to take into account. We need to look on the resilience that we've got, the levels of resilience that we have, to enable us to work from home and to maintain and build on those. And that's something quite hard to do. These things are easy to say, but not necessarily easy to do. And if you struggle with this, reach out to other people. Don't do this on your own. You're not alone in this. And I think it's easy sometimes for us all to fall into the trap and thinking, we ought to be strong, we ought to be resilient. We don't need to reach out to anybody else. We're professionals, that's what we're paid for. And sometimes I think this is much harder for men, and I will say this as a man, it's much harder for men to do this, especially if you're a man of a certain age. We're brought up to think that we need to be strong and we need to be there to support everybody else. And sometimes it's really important to remember that you need supporting as well. And if you need that, reach out. There are people who will help you, but you need to let them know you need the help as well. So work on your resilience, work at what makes you cope, what makes you think about how you cope and how you manage from day to day, and talk to people. Part of being resilient is the ability to make plans and take actions. And it's also about solving problems, but solving problems isn't something that we do on our own. Solving problems is something that we need to do with other people. So again, there's a bit of a theme going here already, that we need to reach out to other people here, and never more so than when you're working on your own. Some of us are lucky enough to have people in the house with us. You may say lucky or unlucky, depending on who's in the house with you and who's making all the noise and stealing all the bandwidth. But let's remember, some people are out there on their own, and that's even harder for people. So we need to reach out and communicate with as many people as possible. And that communication needs to be really effective. And we need to do that in the best way that we possibly can with the tools that we've got currently. And this brings change to how we communicate. We really need to over-communicate and tell people more than we would necessarily need to do if we were there with them face to face. And I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail. But when we think about how we use the technology to communicate and how that can affect our resilience and how that can help our working from home, this is really, really important, because it's no longer appropriate just to ping off an email. Emails get lost in translation, they can get misread, they can get misunderstood, and can cause more problems than they're worth. So we really need to think about how we're communicating as well as what we're communicating. And using technology can make us lazy. It can be a great facilitator of communication, but it can make us lazy. So think about those emails that you're sending. Think about how you're communicating with people. I'm going to talk a bit later about what we need to consider when we're communicating in a situation like this, where we're using video or we're using audio or what it is we're using. But think about what you're really trying to say, and think about with an email, is that really what I'm trying to say? What's the reverse message of that email? Have I got that tone right? We know, don't we, for example, that 97% of our communication, 93% of our communication is non-verbal. Only 7% of our communication is actually the words that we say. It's all about the body language, about the tone of language, about the way we're behaving, what we're picking up, the senses in the room. And that's all missing when you're working remotely. So we need to overcompensate with that to make sure that the message gets across in the way that we want it to get across. And we come across as supporting when we need to be, challenging when we need to be, in an appropriate way, and helping people to understand their levels of resilience, reach out to them, and for us to reach out to them as well when we need help. So that's really important to remember all that when we are working remotely. So I want to go on now to talk about how we work remotely, and remember that when you're working remotely, but you're not alone. Everybody that we work with in our spheres is likely to know somebody or be someone who's working remotely at the moment. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is make connections. And even if they're new connections and remote connections, it's still a connection. We're still hearing that other voice. We're still seeing that other person. We're still reaching out and making that connection. And all of those connections will help us as we go forward and as the situation changes. And very, very much so, they'll help us now. So make those connections. Have the regular check-ins that you would have had in the office if you were in the office. I'm part of a small team and we meet every day. And sometimes we talk about work. Sometimes we talk more about what we did at the weekend, what was on television last night, all the things that we would have done over coffee, all the things that we would have done around a water cooler, if you like, or just those odd passing moments in the office. Not when we're supposed to be working, when we are head down working, but all the little bits of time in between those periods when we're working. And this is very much missing when you're working from home. So you really need to kind of find a way that you can build on that. If it's regular contacts on Zoom, regular contacts on webinars like this, or whatever system you have in place in order to do that. Even if it's only FaceTime or something like that, whatever works for you, put the time in, make sure you do that. And the reason we do that is because it's very easy to see a crisis as being an insurmountable problem. And by linking with others and sharing that, we can break down that crisis into its constituent parts, and we can deal with it rather like eating an elephant. We can tackle it in small chunks and get it done. And I think that's really important to remember that. But you can't do that unless you reach out to other people. You won't have those moments where you can say, oh, can I just, or I just want to, is anybody else having trouble with this? Or those kinds of things, the sort of thing that you would do walking through an open office, walking through a corridor, in the canteen, wherever it may be. Those are the things that are missing, and we need to make up for those in some way. And the big challenge, of course, is how we do that and we stay productive. And that's the real challenge in all this. And it's about setting ourselves realistic goals that we can move forward to, not making big, difficult decisions when it's a difficult situation, because we may not be thinking properly, we may not be thinking appropriately, we may be challenging ourselves in a way that is unrealistic. So think about how we're staying productive, how we're staying as efficient, as effective as we can be, not as we were, but as we can be in this current situation. And that involves taking actions that are very often decisive actions. We don't have the opportunity when working on our own to flip-flop in our own minds and say, well, should I do this? Should I do that? What if I did this? What if I did that? Reach out and touch somebody again and ask what they think. Brainstorm online. Chuck ideas about on a video call, just as you would in an office. We don't need to get in the car. We don't need to put ourselves in danger in a building where other people might not be as well as we are. We don't need to go through all the things that we're being told not to do. We can do these things remotely, and we can use the technology that we've got to help us do that. But technology alone is a tool, and we need to have that mindset and adopt that mindset as well. And part of that, I guess, part of using the technology as well is about developing differently. So how do we develop those skills, and what do we need to develop in order to make the best of the situation that we're in at the moment? How do we look at the way that we're working and say, well, could it be better? Am I just now warming a seat? Should I be going and doing something else? Should I be using this opportunity where it's a quiet afternoon to do some CPD, for example? Should I be looking at any qualifications that I want to take on with vast amount of online qualifications that are available out there at the moment? Should I be looking at something on Management Direct? Should I be reading the latest circular from whatever organisation it is I belong to that's going to help me develop and help me cope with where I am, feel confident, because a lot of this is about feeling, feel confident, feel secure, feel that I can cope with this situation. And I know that I've got those connections now that I can go to if I can't cope. And remember that this isn't forever. This will end. You know, everything changes, everything moves on, everything ends. So however grim, however dark it may feel at the moment, if that's the case, that will change. Equally, of course, however brilliant it feels at the moment, however wonderful it feels that we can work in our pajamas and we're not having to get in the car and drive everywhere, that's going to change as well. You know, this will end, this will move on to be something different, and we will go back to commuting, we will go back to seeing each other, we will go back to those meetings, some of which, you know, let's be honest, will be tedious as they were before, but those things will come back in some shape or form. So remember, those things will change, and we're not on our own with this. More than ever, when you're working from home, it has to be about outcomes and not inputs. We're not automatons, and we're not in a factory. You know, we're not sitting on a production line in our front rooms. So we are working differently. It is about the outcomes, not about the inputs. I've worked from home and worked remotely for more years than I care to remember. And one of the things that you have to try and get used to is that wherever you're working is not necessarily your office. You know, we're not sat at a desk. It's not about being seen. It's about getting the work done. So whether you do that in the garden on a nice sunny day like it was at the weekend, you know, or whether you're doing that at 10 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whenever it might be, that's when it works for you. As long as you're getting the work done, getting it done to the standard that's required, in the time that's required, you need to think about outputs, not inputs. If we just sit at a desk from 9 till 5, 8 till 4, whenever that may be, there will be a lot of time when we are warming the chair and doing nothing else. And when you're working remotely, there's a real risk there that becomes a real burden to you, that can really wear you down. You can get very susceptible to feeling down about it. You can get to a position where you feel very vulnerable. You know, you can sit here thinking, well, I'm not working, I haven't done any work for the last hour. You know, when the situation changes and they start looking at what people are doing, I'm only doing half time, so clearly my job's going to go. They don't need me. I don't have a real job. But, you know, you get in that really, really dark space. So you need to be really wary of that, and that feeling will come and that feeling will go. And there will be days when you think, oh, I wish I'd enjoyed yesterday because I've been at work since 8 and it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm still not finished. But it's about that outcomes. You know, we need to get that mindset changing. It's not about presenteeism. We are present in our houses all the time at the moment. If we're measuring presenteeism, we're all owed hours of loo time. But that's not what it's about. It's about what is coming out of this and what is coming out of you, and when you do your work, how you do your work. You know, and if you do it in your pajamas, fine. If you do it in a 3-piece suit, fine. If you do it in your best cocktail dress, fine. It doesn't matter. What matters is what the outcome is. What have you produced? Does it meet what somebody else is asking you to do? And when we're thinking about this, it's really important not to set yourself additional goals just because you think you have time, because that time will go. And think about if you were in the office and you had additional time, what would you be doing? You'd be talking to colleagues. You'd be prepping stuff for a meeting. You'd be doing a bit of CPD. You'd be catching up on what was going on, the whole buzz of the place that's building on your understanding of what's going on. And those kinds of things are missing. So you need to be thinking about how you're going to use that time productively. But don't grind yourself down thinking, I haven't done anything since 2 o'clock. I haven't done anything all morning. You have. You've done things, just not done things that you would have done before. And this is not the same as before. So don't expect it to be the same as before. Expect it to be different, because it is different. If you think about when you go into an office, if you really did an honest critique of when you go into your workplace, how many hours out of your 8 hours are you actually working? Just work through that in your head and be really, really honest about it. You know, most people go to the office, take your coat off, put the kettle on, switch the computer on, go make a cup of tea, have a chat with people in the kitchen. Or did you see so-and-so last night? What was that all about? You know, have you heard the latest news? Did you have a great weekend? We sit at our desks, it's 9:30. You know, we answer a few emails, decide actually what I want to do is I need a coffee. So I get up, make a coffee, the whole thing goes again. Most people on an 8-hour stint in an office environment, and I'm talking about an office environment here rather than retail or industrial, will not do anywhere near 8 hours in an 8-hour stint. You're probably more likely to do 6 if you're lucky. So think about realistically what you would do in a normal work day and be kind to yourself when you're doing it at home. It's really important to take all this on board and do allow yourself some wobble space. Allow yourself to have a wobble. And as you go through, what you'll start to see over the last 7 weeks, and as we carry on through this lockdown period, what you'll see is you might have had a wobble, your colleagues will have a wobble, it will go like dominoes. Every week somebody will go, oh, I can't cope, I don't know what I'm doing, it's all horrible, I don't want to do it, I just want to leave me alone, I want to be quiet in the corner. You need to allow yourself space to do that. If you're managing a team, you need to allow your team space to do that. They might not all want it, they might not all need it, but some of them will, and some of them will need to be supported. And indeed, some of you will, as well as everybody else. So this is really important to build in and make sure that we're thinking about our well-being as well as thinking about outcomes rather than inputs. Think about things like as well, like setting goals and meetings and how we're working. So if you're thinking about setting goals, who are you setting those goals for? And why are you setting those goals? Are you setting goals because you think you ought to be busy? Are you setting goals because you want to look good? Because look how busy I am and I'm still coping. Think about all the things that are in your calendar. Are they all necessary? Can you buy some space in there? Do you need to be at all those meetings? If you need to be at a meeting, do you need to be there for the whole meeting? Or can you go, do your bit and leave? Sometimes you'll need to be there for the whole meeting, sometimes you won't. Think about why you're doing what you're doing. If you're having a wobble, it's really good to fall back on your values and think, why am I doing this? Why do I even do this job? For God's sake, this is not really worth it, you know. Stop, take a deep breath, count to 10, have a walk around, have a wander around, have a go out in the garden if you've got one, shout, kick a ball about, whatever you need to do to calm down. Come back to it and say, why do I do this? That will help you focus. That will help you prioritize what you need to do that day as well. Think about Maslow, and for those of you that are not familiar with Maslow, have a look on Management Direct. There's some really good information about Maslow's hierarchy of needs on Maslow. Think about what your own needs are, you know, and sometimes it's basics. Sometimes it's, have I got a comfortable seat? Have I got a coffee? You know, can I get to the loo? Or the kids screaming, what needs to be done? Do I need to do the shopping? Has the washing machine just finished? Have I got a space that I can work in? Have I got that sacred space that I can work in? I can say, this is work. This is where work happens. This is my sacred workspace. And on the flip side of that, what's really important is this is my sacred space where work doesn't happen. No work happens in this space. This is my house. This is my home. This is my family's home. This part of it is sacred. Whether you can do that with the whole room or whether you can do that with a section of a room, it's so important to have that sacred space. Avoid looking back and comparing yesterday with today, because yesterday is gone, and indeed working in offices the way we've worked, for the time being at least, and some might say for good, has gone. And when I say for good, I mean things will be different when we go back. It's not the same. Don't look back and say, oh God, a month ago I was doing this, this, and this, and this, and now I'm only doing this. It's different. Allow yourself to be different. I've put in there keeping focus and keeping tomatoes. And what I mean by this is there's a lovely technique that people talk about called the Pomodoro technique. And you may or may not have heard of this. And it's based on the little tomato egg timers that you get that look like a tomato. You wind them up. They're called a Pomodoro because Italian for tomato is Pomodoro. And And the lovely little egg timers. And when I talk about the Pomodoro moment, what I would suggest you do is, if you're losing focus, set yourself a timer, either on your phone or an egg timer or whatever works for you. Just set it for 20 minutes and do nothing else. Just do one thing and one thing alone for 20 minutes. Now that could be just typing. Just type out what you feel, what you're feeling today. How am I feeling? What am I doing? Focusing on an email, just type in that email, switch everything else off. It could equally be having 20 minutes just kicking a tree in the garden, because that's what you need to do. But having that fixed period of time, saying for this period of time, I'm doing nothing else but this, will help you come back focused, will help your creativity, will help your well-being, will help all sorts of things just to mellow down, give you the opportunity to take 5, come back stronger, come back much more focused and determined. What a really, really good technique as well is to make it rain. Just what I call make it rain. This is a well-recognized technique for self-compassion. And the RAIN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And if you are struggling working from home, or struggling anywhere for that matter, just recognize what's going on. Allow the experience, allow it to be there just as it is. Don't try and change it. Just go, yeah, I feel really good, or I feel terrible. And it's okay to feel terrible. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm lost. That's okay. Whatever you're feeling at that moment, whether it's massive joy or deep sadness, that is okay. That's fine. Allow that to happen. Investigate it. Investigate it with interest and care. And one way of doing this is trying to take you out of it. Okay. So this body is feeling sad. This body is feeling joyous. What does that feel like? What does that mean? What does sadness look like? What does joy look like? What does that happiness make me feel like physically? And then nurture it, and nurture yourself with self-compassion. And here is a really important thing to do, is to think about, what would you tell your friend? What would you tell your colleague? What would you tell a family member who is saying the things to you that you're saying to yourself? Because if you wouldn't be horrible and challenging to them, don't be horrible and challenging to yourself. If you would be kind and compassionate and thoughtful to them, then be kind and compassionate and thoughtful to yourself. This is really a really simple technique. It's hard to master, but it's a really good one to practice on as well. And give yourself that space, and give yourself compassion, and treat yourself well. Working at home is a challenge, a real hard challenge. It's a thing to get used to. It's not for everybody, and some people will be itching to get back in the office, and some people won't. And that's part of that, allowing that experience. Be the best you can for you, and be as kind as you possibly can to you, and that will help all of this work and help all of this flow. I want to talk a little bit now about when we are communicating with people online and when we're having those online relationships. And it really is important to think about what's missing. Think about all the things that we pick up from another live, warm body just being in the room. You know, we're sensing things, we're feeling things, we're experiencing emotions that we can't necessarily identify or put our finger on. We know when someone's feeling awkward. It just feels wrong, doesn't it? You know, nobody has to say anything. We just know somebody in the room is feeling a bit awkward, and there's that awkward silence, there's an awkward moment. Think about what's missing when you're talking to people online. Think about body language. Think about the essence of the message, the clarity. Am I being clear? Sometimes when you're working remotely and you're working online, you don't get as many options to get the clarity in as you would in a face-to-face situation. You know, sometimes it's not easy to say, sorry, what did you mean? What did you say? Did you just say what I think you said? That gets lost over the ether. So I think it's really important to work on that, really important to test your clarity. When you're working from home and in very difficult situations like this, don't overpromise to compensate for being away from the person, to compensate for not being in the office, to compensate because you feel you've not done anything all morning, like we talked about earlier. And whenever you can, once you've done the communication online, if you feel it's necessary, follow it up with an email. You know, if you think about that, you think, did I say what I meant to say? Did I say what I thought I said? Did they seem to understand that? Just follow it up. Follow it up with a nice email that says, you know, following our conversation, I just wanted to clarify, this is what I was trying to get across. Is that your understanding of it? If it isn't, it's an opportunity to go back, have another conversation, have another chance to say, this is the situation, this is what I need you to do. Are you happy with that? What support do you need from me? All the things that we would do when we're managing people. But we need to put extra effort into that when we're managing people remotely, when we're working with people remotely. A number of things to think about as well is, it's behind you. What is behind you? What's behind you? Have you got your washing hanging on a horse behind you? Have you got inappropriate pictures? Is there something on the telly that your children are watching that you don't necessarily want everybody else to look at? What is behind you? Think about what people are seeing behind you. Who else is there with you? If you've got kids running around, great. That's great at the moment. Everybody's got kids running around if they've got kids. You might have surly teenagers getting up and coming past you, half dressed, looking to get to the fridge to see what they can eat next. You may have small children who want your attention. That's fine. Just tell people who's there. One of the things that might happen on this meeting today is my 13-year-old son might come through to get some food. I've asked him not to, but you know what they're like. So let's crack on. Think about how you look. I put their mirror on the wall. And one of the things I think is really important is have a look in the mirror before you go into a meeting, because the last thing you see is the first thing that everybody else sees. Is that what you want them to see? Mostly it will be. But try and avoid getting into a position where you just don't care, because then you need to reach out and help, ask for help, get some support, refocus, do the Pomodoro, everything else that we've talked about today. What are you looking at is an interesting one, because lots of people are working on tablets, lots of people are working on laptops. And we look at a laptop or we look at a tablet and we see one thing. What we don't see is what the other person is looking at. So if you've got a facility on your remote system where you can see your own picture, I would have that on as well, so you can see what other people are looking at. I've done so many interviews, so many meetings where you're looking at people's noses or you're looking at people's chins or the side of their head because they've got two screens or whatever it might be. And whenever you are communicating online, as in real life, be authentic. Be as authentic as possible. We're not looking to see people pretend to be something else just because they're working from home. We want all of you brought to the workplace. We want all of you brought to the meeting. We want all of you brought to this interaction, and be authentic and be genuine and be you, because that's what people are employing. That's what people are engaging with. That's what people want to talk to. A couple of other things that I want to go through quickly, just a few thoughts really. This isn't normal. This isn't normal for a lot of people. For people like me who've done this for 20 odd years, it is normal. This is our every day. But give yourself some space. As I said, this isn't normal. And whatever you do, be kind to yourself and be kind to other people. Stay connected. Remember your own health and well-being. Remember there will be a time after this is over. And we may not go back to what it was before, and a lot of us would hope that that's not the case. There has to be some good come out of this, and there has to be a new future, I think, as a personal message. But it will be different, and it will not be like this forever. One really good thing to think about is plan what you're going to do when lockdown ends, or we're thinking about lockdown. Plan what you're going to do when this is over. What's the first thing you're going to do when lockdown ends? Now, if that's go to the shop and get a beer, that's great. If it's get in the car and go for a drive to the country or the seaside, that's great. If it's go and see your friends, that's great. If it's go and see your relatives, whatever it might be. Or it could be work related. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. Whatever it is, have a plan. Have something in place for you to look forward to for when lockdown ends. Just a couple of other things I wanted to pick up on. We're talking about change, and for a lot of people, working at home is about change, and it's really worthwhile having a look at this Kubler-Ross transition curve on the Management Direct. If you're a member and you have access to Management Direct, I would recommend you go and have a look at this. Think about the stages of change, because a lot of people will be going through these at the moment. People will still be in shock. People will be in denial. Some people will be feeling depressed, and some people will be on the other side of this and starting to integrate with the new way of working and looking forward to a new way of working. But equally, it's really important to remember this. When this ends, if you go back to the office, this will happen. You're going to go through this. Oh my God, suddenly last night we're told, as of this morning, we've got to go back to work. What does that mean? How does that work? You know, there's a shock there for a lot of people. I don't want to go back to work. I like working at home. There's a denial and an anger there for a lot of people. So have a look at this and just familiarize yourself with the stages of this, because that will help you deal with the change. Another thing I want you to think about as well is, you know, when this ends, think about your team. You've been away from your team physically for a lot of time now, potentially. And when you go back, think about it. It's going to feel like a new team. You know, you're back in an office. You might not even be back in the same office. You might be back in a different place. People may have joined you. People may have left during the time that we've been in lockdown. Think about Tuckman's change team building model, and think about the stages that you might be at with your team. There will be a period of forming. That's going on at the moment as well, because this is new. It's a new team. Everybody's forming, storming, and the norming will come later. And that's really important to remember that when you're thinking about that productivity element as well. You know, be kind to yourself, because we are storming, norming, and forming, and as is everybody else. So just think about these things. Have a look at them on Management Direct. And while we're talking about Management Direct, you know, there's some amazing resources on there. I would recommend, if you are a member, get on there, have a look. There's all sorts of things, resources, there's models that you can look at. There's pearls of wisdom on there from leaders and other people. There's some brilliant leader videos on there. Webinar recordings are on there. This particular webinar will be on there as well as a recording. And our latest resource for you, Better Managers, is available on there as well. And if you're not a member, there will be links within this webinar when it goes out later on that tell you how to get to Better Managers resources as well. That's helping everybody deal with the new normal that we're faced with at the moment. That's it from me. So I'm going to hand you back to Natasha, and I believe Natasha might have a couple of questions for us.
Thank you, David. Before we move over to the Q&A, I just wanted to say one of the great things about these webinars is that they still give people the opportunity to connect with others in the same situation. So even in the chat box today, there have been so much interaction between the audience, offering advice, answering each other's questions. It's just great to see. So we have had a few questions submitted prior to today. Do you have any tips on how to switch off from work in the evening and weekends?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Personally, I use this has been a challenge for me, but I use my own desktop. I have a work laptop, but I will be honest, I use my own desktop because my desk is not ideal for having two computers on. So what I do is I have one browser, and I use Chrome, which I do all my work stuff in. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the week, I close Chrome down, the browser that I use for work, and then I can still use my computer for my personal stuff in a different part of the computer for that, in a different system. But that said, it really is important to have a space you can move away from. So I would suggest not doing work, if you can possibly help it, on your settee where you watch the telly at night, for example, where you sit with your family, where you might sit and have your dinner. You know, don't if you can help it, don't work where you relax as well. So have a separate space. If it's you know, if you have to sit at the worktop in the kitchen, if you're lucky enough to have a desk, if you have a dining table, wherever you sit, make that be somewhere else where you relax, because otherwise the two can muddle up.
That's great, thank you. And how do you actually switch from work mode to family mode?
I'm lucky enough to have a garden, so I do a little commute. I actually go out in the garden, walk around the garden as if I were driving home, and I come back in and I'm back in work. Equally, I wear work clothes. So at the end of the day, when I finish work, I will go and take my work shirt off and put a t-shirt on or a sweatshirt or whatever it might be, depending on the time of the year. But there's always that delineation between I'm at work and now I'm not at work. And equally in the morning, I get up and I exercise indoors at the moment. I will sit and meditate for a bit. I'll have my breakfast. Then I go and put a work shirt on, and I come and I sit at my desk and I open up, and here I am on my work. And so I think that's really important. But you know, I'm not saying that's what you should do, but find something that works for you. Find something that breaks that up for you, and there's a definite delineation. It's so important, because otherwise things bleed together, and where does one stop and where does one start gets lost. And suddenly you're answering emails at 10 o'clock on a Friday night when you should be watching Graham Norton or having a glass of wine.
Absolutely, and people in the comments have actually said the same thing. So Paula said that even if you have a physical bag that you unpack every morning and then pack away again at night, it's just, you know, really good advice.
Great idea.
To help separate that. So we have had a question actually from Russell, who said, what would your thoughts be on talking to your staff when they're on furlough, and would you still encourage interaction but just not on work-related issues?
I have to be completely honest here and say I don't know all the rules about furlough. So I think my advice would be, if you can do it within the rules and not risk your furloughing situation, then I would encourage you to maintain interaction. But I think my answer has to be, you need to take advice from somebody who understands the situation. Sorry, Russell.
No, that's absolutely, sorry, a bit of a curveball question there that I chose.
Okay.
We've had lots of people saying they're taking the time to do CPD. Obviously, Management Direct is a CMI member benefit, so please do, as David said, go along and have a look there. It doesn't actually look like we've had any more questions in the chat. It's been a lot of interaction, as I said, between the audience themselves. So unless anyone has any more questions, just give them a few moments.
I think in the absence of questions, I would just reinstate how important it is to be kind to yourself. You know, this is a difficult time. This is a challenging time for everybody. Be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. So we don't have any more questions, so that's it for today's session. Thank you to everyone who's joined us, who've been chatting amongst themselves and have offered advice to each other. Thank you, David, for your insights and expertise, as always. We are running another session tomorrow on the Chartered Assessment Guide. So if you are looking to become chartered, this is your chance to find out more. You can use the link that's just been dropped in the chat to book your place. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.